So now the good thing, working with me, working with an agent, when you feel overwhelmed and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is too much, you can call your agent and say, you know what? I I don't know what's going on. This is too much information. I'm tired of submitting documents. They keep needing stuff. I think at one point they're going to ask me for my child. And then so me as your agent, I'm going to say, you know what? No, it's okay. You got to think about they are about to give you a large amount of money, right? So they want to be in your business. So if you're asking them, telling them, I want $300,000. Now think about it. If someone was asking you for $300,000, would you not want a lot of information too? Hey y'all, good morning and happy Friday. So we made it, y'all. This was a very long week, but it was like some good stuff for my client. So I had a client, well, I have a client who's moving out of the States, and I was able to find someone to rent her place while she is out of town. So that was some good news. And last night, we are one step closer to getting a clear to close. So today we're going to talk about what actually goes on after you get under contract. So we talked about what you need to do before you purchase a home, kind of ways to get ready, whether you're investing or whether you are a first time home buyer or looking to sell your home and to go into a new home. But today I want to go behind the scenes on what us as agents usually do for when we have a client that gets under contract. So I talked about this before, where, of course, we want you to get pre approved. That's kind of like always the first step. But as I mentioned before, it is for your benefit as well, because sometimes you can get approved for example, let me give you an example of story time. So when I was purchasing my home, I got approved for more than the house that I actually purchased, because what I did, I had a budget. Like I wanted to stay in within a certain amount. So sometimes you can get approved for more, but your own budget is something different than what the bank says that you can actually do, right? So just because you get approved for 500,000, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to purchase a home at 500,000. So like for me, I I told y'all before, I like to shop. So, I need to have money to shop. I like to travel, so I need to have money to travel. So I don't want I don't want to be house poor. And what house poor means is that you put everything into this house and you have nothing left at the end. So that is something that I am going to encourage you guys to think about. Kind of like when I told you the first step is getting pre-approved. Before that, make sure you know your budget. Make sure you know what you can afford. So if you're paying $2,000 a month comfortably, and you can't go over that, that's what you tell the lender. So the lender will basically approve you for the amount to make sure you don't go over that 2,000, right? So that's kind of like always the first step. But I also want to let you know what happens once we go out shopping. You find the home that you want. And real quick, for my first time home buyers, 70% of the time, right? It's a high percentage. You're not going to get every single thing that you want in your house. You're not. It's just, it just doesn't happen unless you're building from the ground up. You're not going to find a house that has everything that is on your checkbox. And sometimes you will. Sometimes I had a client I closed last year, and she was like, Trisha, I think this is everything I ever wanted in the house. And I was like, okay, cool. That doesn't normally happen with a first time home buyer. But it's great if it does. So when you're out shopping, keep that in mind. Like you're not going to find every single thing, that you want first time around, right? That your first time purchasing a home. I know for me, I had like a list. I need this, I need that. And then the way my bank account was set up, I was like, yeah, so Trisha, you're gonna have to like, scale down. You're gonna have to scale down on what you want, So now I'm at a point where I've been at my house in my home for like 5 years. Now I'm like, you know what? I think I want some of the things that I missed out on my first home. So I think it's time for me to, upgrade a little bit. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as well. So when, people like me, agents, when they're showing you around, keep that in mind that, we are going to do our best to find you, your dream home, for you to move into a home, but you may not get every single thing that you want. So I would say let's, start with like your top 5 or your top 10 things that you want, in a home. And then, as you're touring, says, okay, this thing has my top 5. This home has my top 5. It's in my budget, maybe that's the route that you need to go. So once that happens, you say, okay, Trisha, I like this house. So me as an agent, so this is some of the things that happens behind the scenes that you guys are not aware of, because I think you guys think that we just drive around, show people homes, go to networking events, take pictures with sold signs. There's so many things that goes on behind the scenes that you guys don't know about. And for me, like if there's a problem that's going on in the transaction, I wait to tell my client, because especially if I have a client that gets overwhelmed very easily, I'm not going to tell you everything that we're going through to kind of get you to the closing table. So you found the home that you like. Trisha, I want to get this house. Okay, awesome. So me as an agent, I'm going to look at the comps in the area to see if the house, what the house is actually listed for, what, the seller actually wants you to purchase this home for. I want to make sure that it makes sense. Like some people, an agent may, or a seller may think their house is worth more than what it really is. So my due diligence is to make sure that when we make this offer, it is within the right. So what happens is if this house doesn't appraise, because the appraisal is going to have to get done, and we're going to get into that, but I want to make sure that you as my client is protected. Like you're paying for what the house is actually worth, right? That should make sense. So once that happens, everything looks good. I submit what we call an offer to the listing agent, and the listing agent is the person who represents the seller. And I tell them, okay, my client is ready to move forward with this house. This is how much you're willing to pay. And we talked about earnest money. This is how much earnest money, the due diligence period. Remember, we talked about that. That's on that contract. So the initial paperwork that will be sent to the listing agent is what we call an offer. So that offer kind of lays out everything. If we're going to pay the amount that's listed on the, MLS or wherever we found the home, and then they have a chance to say yes or no if they want the offer. So now let's say we make an offer and they say yes. So yes, now we're doing a happy dance, like, yay, okay. So what they're gonna do, so when we submitted the offer, you already signed to say, okay, yes, I agree with what Trisha put on this form, and I want to move forward. So your signature is gonna be on there. So it's not just gonna be mine, it's gonna be yours as the buyer as well. So when we send it to the seller, and so now they have to agree to sign it as well. So that's the other part. So once we submit an offer, once it's signed by the seller, the offer has been accepted. So now we're doing a happy dance. We're dancing. Yes, we got it. We got it. But there's still some more steps that I told you. Like it's so much more than just getting under contract, right? So after you get under contract, me as your trusted advisor, I'm going to say, okay, now it's time for you to get an inspection. We talked about getting an inspection before, or why it's so important. So I'm going to suggest that. We're going to go ahead and schedule that. So in the meantime, the lender who approved you to get this mortgage needs to see the contract as well, because they're the ones that's giving you the money. As much as I, love you guys as my buyers, I don't got the money. So we have to, so the lender has to give you the money. So they need to see the contract. They want to make sure that everything that we offered, same thing. They're going to look to make sure like the house is actually worth what we offered and what was listed. So they're doing their due diligence as well to make sure the amount of money that they're giving you, that you can actually get it. So I will be honest, the process of underwriting is can be a nightmare because the amount of stuff that they ask you for, it's like, do you need my blood sample? Because this is a lot. You know what I mean? So I'm like, this is too much. And I'm not gonna lie, y'all. So when my first deal I told you guys was me, as it was my home. I was the agent. Whew, that was work, right? But I got overwhelmed too. I'm like, this is too much. Like I gave you all this information, and to the point, like I was crying, like, man, I'm ready to have this over with. But I didn't have somebody to say it's gonna be okay because it was me. So now the good thing, working with me, working with an agent, when you feel overwhelmed and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is too much, you can call your agent and say, you know what? I I don't know what's going on. This is too much information. I'm tired of submitting documents. They keep needing stuff. I think at one point they're going to ask me for my child. And then so me as your agent, I'm going to say, you know what? No, it's okay. You got to think about they are about to give you a large amount of money, right? So they want to be in your business. So if you're asking them, telling them, I want $300,000. Now think about it. If someone was asking you for $300,000, would you not want a lot of information too? So when you're going through the process, and when I was going through the process, I didn't think like that. I was like, listen, y'all asking for too much information. But in reality, it makes sense. Like you're asking for a large amount of money, right? But me as an agent, I have my clients call me all the time. Oh my gosh, Trisha, they're asking me for so much information. And I kind of walk them through the process, let them know like it's gonna be okay. We're almost there. Trying to like make sure that they're okay. But it has to happen, right? So that's happening behind the scenes as you're getting that inspection report done, right? So once the inspection comes in, and let's say the house is a really good house. And I've had this before where the house didn't really have much that needed to be done. Like it was so small that my clients were like, it's not even worth asking them to do these things. These are regular wear and tear in the house. I'm not worried about it. So if that happens, okay, we're moving on to the next phase. We passed that due diligence period. We're telling the seller, you know what, we're moving forward. So, like I said, you're still going through this underwriting process. The lender is still asking you for a lot of information, right? So part of that, they're going to ask you to pay for an appraisal. So remember that's one of the fees that I told you that you're going to have to make sure that you have, because they want to make sure that the house is actually worth what they said. So if you tell them, okay, yes, I'm going to pay $300,000 for this house, the appraiser and the lender is going to make sure that that house is worth $300,000. Now, there's two things that happens. It's either it appraises for that amount and everything's all good, you move forward. And if it doesn't, so this is what happens when it doesn't. When it doesn't appraise for that amount, the seller can agree to lower it to that amount. Some sellers say, you know what, can you pay the difference? Which I would never recommend, because you're basically paying higher than what the home is worth, or you just back out the contract from there. So that's what pretty much happens in that, right? So you have, the choice, and so does the seller. So you can back out of the contract if that happens. But if it all is good, next step, okay, we're going to the next, milestone in this closing process, right? So when we actually get back from break, I'm gonna go over like the final steps. And then if you guys have any questions that you want to ask about the process, call in at 404-361-1571. All right, talk to you guys soon. All right, y'all. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. All right. So, yes, if you have any questions, like I said, 404-361-1571. But I want to talk about, before we get off, the next milestone after the appraisal is done. So let's say the appraisal comes in and it's for the amount that we want it to be. So yay, we're happy again. But there's still more. So with the lender is going to also lock in your rate. So everybody's talking about rates and how rates are up and rates are down and all that good stuff. So when when you get under contract, one of the most important things you're going to do is lock in your rate. So the other, like, I think it was like maybe 2 weeks ago, I had a client who locked in their rate at like 6.25, which is good. It's not as great as it was, during COVID time, but we're probably not going to see that for a long time. But 6.25 is not too bad. It's better than a 7 or an 8. So 6.25 is not bad. So what my client did, they locked in that rate. So that's what you want. You want to lock in that rate at that 6.25 or whatever it is. And so usually when you, what they call lock the rate in, you have a certain amount of time. So some banks, they only do 30 days, some banks do 45. And so this is something to think about too. So if you get a new construction home, unfortunately, if the home is not already built, you're not going to be able to lock in your rate, right? So, because like I said, it's like 30 days, 45 days. Sometimes if you have a new construction home, it takes about 60, 90, a year, to get it done. So you're not going to be able to lock in the rate. Now, for the example that we're going through right now, you are going to be able to lock in your rate because we already passed the appraisal phase. So your rate's locked. We're good to go. We're moving forward. And so we call these like milestones in the process that you're going through. Now, behind the scenes, like I said, your agent, I'm making sure that not only did the lender get your contract, we also have to deal with the closing attorney. So in the state of Georgia, you have to close with an attorney. So at the closing, well, sometimes you don't have to actually go to an office. Now they have different things where they'll come to your house. There's like different options that you can do, but you do have to close with an attorney. So behind the scenes, like I said, some more stuff that we're doing. So not only as your agent, I'm making sure that inspection gets done. I'm making sure that the appraiser is able to get in the home, by contacting the listing agent. And then these are some things we're doing behind the scenes. And we're contacting a closing attorney to make sure that you have a clear title. So we talked about this before. So before you purchase a home, you want to make sure, especially if it's a resale home, that this title is clear. That means they don't have anyone saying they have any rights to this property once you purchase it. So that's very important to make sure that you have a clear title. Story time. I had a client of mine who was purchasing a home. And this is actually last year. Last year, she was purchasing a home. Everything was good. We are passing the milestones. Everything's going well. Then we get a call saying that they found a $100,000 lien on the property. Oh no. So these are some things that happen during a transaction that we are sometimes not prepared for. Like we're thinking everything's good, but apparently the seller didn't know that they had this lien either. So it was so good that we were able to do this title. So we actually were able to work it out. Surprisingly enough, they, kind of knew what happened. But they just didn't know it was actually on their home. They didn't know it was a lien on their home. They just thought it was something that they owed. So keep in mind that if you do have like big debt like that, like $100,000 or more, and you have an asset like a home, they can attach to your property depending on what your contract that you went in with them. So whatever assets that you have, that could be a lien on your property, right? So in this case that I was just telling you about, we were able to kind of move forward. But if they weren't, we would have to back out of that contract. So that's something to think about as well. So these are things that are happening once again behind the scene. And like I told you, sometimes I don't tell my clients what's going on until it's rectified, whether we would have to, close, not move forward with this house, or we could close. So in this case, I never told my client what was going on. It was just me, the listing agent, and the title company. We're trying to work it out. And the good thing is we were able to work it out, and we got to the closing table, and I told my client when we got to the closing table, and she was like, "What?" Yeah. So the reason why I didn't tell her is because we already had to back out of another contract because the other seller wasn't willing to put any work into the house. So we backed out of that. So she really loved this house. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell her that we may not close on this one. So I didn't want to have her in a panic until we know exactly what was going on. And I'm so glad that I did that because she was like, thank you. Cause I couldn't deal with not one more thing. So that's, part of having a trusted advisor like myself. I want to make sure that I stressed out and you don't. You already going through enough with getting this paperwork together, getting this money together. You don't need an added stress, right? So after, all that's happening, this is things that's happened behind the scenes. I'm sending documents to the listing agents about different things, throughout the process. And so now we're getting closer to the home stretch, right? Now the lender is like, you know what? The appraisal came in, you submitted the million documents, that I asked you for. Now, we're closer to getting what we call a clear to close. And what a clear to close means and why it's an agent gets excited, the buyer gets excited. That means we pass all the milestones that you need to have to close, right? The due diligence period, the house is great. You could just move in and move your things in. The appraisal came in, it's for the value that you wanted. All the documents that they went over, like I told you, they're going to be looking at bank statements and pay stubs and all that stuff cleared. And they are clear to close, meaning that they are going to give you this money that you're asking for. That $300,000 it's happening for you, right? So we're all doing a happy dance, like, yes, we're getting to the closing table. Yes, yes, yes. So that's kind of towards the end. That's what happens at the end. Everything is what we call clear to close. So your interest rate has been locked. Everything has been verified and triplified, if that's a word. But yeah, everything has been checked. And so now we're getting towards the end. So now me as your agent, I'm gonna say, you know what? Let's make sure that this house still looks like what it's supposed to before we actually sign on the dotted line, right? So we call that a final walkthrough. So I will schedule that final walkthrough a couple of days before or the day of, just depends on the schedules. And we want to make sure that when the time that we toured the house, the time that we inspected the house, everything is in working condition. So this never happened to me, but this happened to another agent that I know. They went to do the final walkthrough and there was a leak in the house from the water heater that of course was not there when they toured, and the seller didn't live there, so they didn't know. So when we went to do when they went to do that final walkthrough, the water heater had busted. Now, if we had not done that final walkthrough, you would have signed on that dotted line, and guess what? It would be on you because now you're the official owner. So the final walkthrough is just as important as doing that pre-inspection, because we want to make sure the house looks like what it looked like when we, said yes to this house, right? So we make sure we do that final walkthrough. Everything looks good. And also, if in my scenario today, we didn't have anything to fix, but sometimes if you have certain items that the seller said that they would fix, that's the time that's the time that you look to see if it actually was done, right? So if they said that they were going to paint this or clean the carpet or whatever the agreement was, we want to make sure all of that is done, right? So that final walkthrough is important because we want to make sure that they held their end of the bargain, because we did. We got the financing, you got you got approved and you're headed to the closing table. Now the seller has to make sure that they do their part as well. And one thing I do want to, throw in there as well, a lot of the times I'm talking to buyers is because the selling process is not as many steps as it is for the buyer. The buyer has a lot more steps to go through than a seller, to be, completely honest. Some of the things that I already mentioned about selling your home, it's very simple. But as you can see on the buying side, it's a lot of moving parts that we have to make sure that gets done. So that's why it's so important to have a trusted advisor, someone like me, hopefully me, to kind of, go through that process with you. And if that is you, my direct number is 678-849-4734. And if you want to call in, it's 404-361-1571. Also, actually, I said last week that I was going to give out a gift card to a person that calls in and has a question or just calls in. I want to see who's my listening audience. And so I'm going to give a $25 gift card. If you call in at 404-361-1571, and it will be at the station for you waiting. Okay. So before we end the show, I want to make sure that you kind of understand everything that I went through already. So we talked about how you get under contract. We talked about, that pre-approval, making sure you know your budget, before, even getting under contract. So it's like pre-approval. Well, it's budget pre-approval, right? Getting under contracts, making sure you get that inspection done, making sure that, well, you don't have to make sure of this, but making sure you have the money for the appraisal, and making sure that you are prepared for the millions of documents that you're going to have to give your lender to move forward. So my time today has ended. So I'm going to miss y'all, but I will be back next week at the same time, at the same place, and have a great week. And actually, happy 4th of July. Yeah, so that's coming as well. We celebrate Juneteenth, but I just, I must say that for the people who still celebrate, 4th of July. All right, have a great day. All right, y'all, that's my time. I'll see y'all next week.